Hello everyone. So in this video we are going to discuss water. What are some things that we are doing to divert it and how can we maybe find some solutions to the demand of water. So water is one of our most precious resource and it is renewable. So human activities can affect waterways. We are withdrawing water at unsustainable levels, depleting many sources of surface water and groundwater. We have created dams and canals that has altered natural habitats that can impact the biodiversity. So fresh water is distributed unevenly in time and space. So for example, India's monsoon storms can dump half of the region's annual rain in just a few hours, and rivers have seasonal differences in flow because of the timing of rains and snow melt. And maybe you notice this too, that the climate is changing as well. So people build dams to store water from wetter months to use it in drier times. So there's a mismatch between water availability and human need. So that's already happening, but on top of that, we have global climate change. Um, and that's worsening the conditions by altering precipitation patterns, melting glaciers, ice caps are melting, and drought. So in this picture, you can see how much water is found where. So it's unevenly distributed. In some areas, there is more water than needed, and in some areas, people don't have enough water. So the distribution of human population does not match the distribution of water. So we all use water at home for drinking, cooking, cleaning, and we water our lawns and gardens. And so a lot of activities require water. And especially in agriculture, farmers, they use 70% of the water that's available or to irrigate their crops, to water livestock. And industry counts for about 20%, and residential and municipal use accounts for 10%. And that's a lowest out of all of these. So the removal of water from aquifer or from a body of surface water without returning to its source is called consumptive use. So you're just gonna take some water, but you're not gonna return it. That's consumptive. Non-consumptive use is when you're using it to, for example, um, create electricity, and it's just gonna run through a certain machine, and then after that, you're gonna return it. So water from a river is passed through a dam machinery to turn turbines and release downstream, and that's gonna create electricity. But you are taking the water, but you are also returning it. So that's non-consumptive use. Water mining is another term where someone is withdrawing water faster than it can be replenished. So it's taking place in many, many regions. And this red is high overuse, green is adequate supply. And because of excessive water withdrawals, many of the world's rivers, for example, Colorado and Rio Grande rivers in Western North America, the Yellow River in China, Nile River in Egypt, they regularly run dry before reaching the sea. So this reduction in flow threatens the future of cities and farms that depend on river, but also drastically alters the ecology of the rivers and their deltas, changing plant communities and everything. And it also impacts the organisms living in water. So it can wipe out populations of fish and invertebrates, and that's going to impact fisheries and biodiversity. Um, so the drying of Aral Sea has led to loss of 60,000 fishing jobs. Um, so that's also impacting the economy. And winds blow pesticide-laden dust up from the dry lake bed, and that causes the loss of most cotton production. Groundwater can also be depleted, and it's more easily depleted than surface water because it's recharged very slowly. So if we compare an aquifer to a bank account, we're making more withdrawals than deposits. So the balance is shrinking. So that's what I'm trying to say here. So groundwater depletion is a major problem because 1/3 of Earth's human population relies on groundwater for its needs. And as aquifers are mined, the water table drops. This is showing groundwater depletion. Um, and you can see where it's red, it's in danger. So when it's over extracted in coastal areas, saltwater from the oceans can intrude into inland aquifers. So this doesn't happen normally because it's being pushed back, but so it's being pushed back by the fresh groundwater um, that's flowing towards the sea, but it can happen if the groundwater is not replenished. And groundwater also becomes more difficult and expensive to extract. So in parts of Mexico, India, Florida, coastal regions in California, they have the wells that are drying up. Water tables are dropping. So they have wells drying up, saline water instead of fresh water. As aquifers lose water, they become less able to support the overlaying strata. Strata means layer, so the layers that are on top of it that causes the land surface to subside and causes a sinkhole like this. So there's all these layers that are on top. These are aquifers, and that can cause a sinkhole. So this can cause the buildings to lean or large areas for land to suddenly collapse. I'm sure you guys know about bottled water. Uh, Probably a lot of you drink bottled water. Maybe you drink it, maybe you drink tap water. So this is a booming business. People made so much money with this. It's 160 billion in sales worldwide in 2015. People buy bottled water for convenience and taste. And they've done some blind tests where they give you a tap water and a glass of bottled water, and people cannot tell the difference. So they have shown no preference. So it has a lot of major ecological impacts because the energy cost of bottled water are estimated to be 1,000 to 2,000 times greater than the energy cost of tap water. And that's due to transportation cost. After their contents are consumed, after you drink the bottled water, 3 out of 4 bottles in the United States are not recycled and they end up in landfills. That's 30 to 40 billion containers per year. So many people who buy bottled water, they do so because they think it's better than tap water. But like I said, they do the test. They did the blind test. People think tap water tastes just as good. And they done chemical analysis that show that bottled water is no safer than or healthier than tap water. So as a result of environmental impacts of bottled water, lots of colleges and universities have banned the sale of bottled water to restrict the use of plastic on campus. And then we have flooding. Hopefully, you guys are familiar with flooding. It's a process that occurs when snows melt or ice caps melt, and heavy water swells. The volume of the rivers spills out on the riverbanks. What people have started doing to protect against floods, they build levees. They're built along the banks of levees, um, water to hold water in the main channels. And in the long term, floods are beneficial to both natural systems and human agriculture because floodwaters they build an enriched soil by spreading nutrient-rich sediments over large areas. But in short term, floods can do tremendous damage to farms, homes, and properties, especially people who decide to live near floodplains. Hopefully, you remember floodplains. That's where the soils are very nutritious and species rich. So we divert surface water to suit our needs. And we do that through aqueducts. Aqueducts are channels. Um, that we can build, also known as canals, to divert the water. The Colorado River Aqueduct diverts water from Parker Dam to Los Angeles and San Diego areas. So it's heavily diverted. So, and they do this also to meet the demand and so they can supply the water. So we do that. Another one is a dam. So, dam is any obstruction placed in a river or stream to block the flow. And dams can create reservoirs, artificial lakes that store water for human use. So we build dams to prevent floods, provide drinking water, facilitate irrigation, and generate electricity. And we have built a lot of dams worldwide. The dams, they have a mix of benefits and costs of damming, um, cost for the environment. So this picture is kind of showing you that. So the generation of clean and renewable electricity is one of the major benefits. Those are the green boxes here. And habitat alternation is one of the negative impacts. Those are the orange boxes here. So loss of recreational opportunities on the river, fisheries decline, disruption of flooding that builds topsoil, habitat alternation. So there are some benefits and there are some negative impacts. So because of those negative impacts, people think that the dams overweight their benefits. They're pushing for the dams to be dismantled. So by removing dams, they're letting rivers flow free, and we can maybe restore the riparian ecosystems that are found along the rivers and reestablish some economical valuable fisheries. So they are um, trying to remove the dams. So some dams are being removed. And so in addition to reestablishing fisheries, there's also they can return the shellfish and fish habitats in and around the mouths of river disrupted by the dam. So we need to start thinking about solutions. There's, population is growing to meet the demand for food for the population, irrigation or farming is growing, industrial development is also going up. All these things, they need water. Our use of fresh water has doubled over the last 50 years. So we need to address the water shortage. We either need to decrease our demand or we need to increase the supply. So one of the solutions, some called xeriscaping, is a landscaping using plants adapted to arid conditions. So some people in California, they receive rebates to replace the grass with low demand native plants. So sometimes you'll see that we're planting the plants that are not native, which means they're going to require more water. But if you replace those with the native plants, they do not require as much water. It's better for the environment. And also there's desalinization, and that is the removal of salt from seawater or other water so that water can be useful. So salt can be removed by heating and evaporating ocean water, distillation, or by filtering through membranes with tiny pores that trap the salt. This is reverse osmosis. Osmosis is the movement of water. That's what it refers to. Desalination is very expensive and uses lots of energy and generates concentrated salty waste. Saudi Arabia gets most of its drinking water from desalination. Desalinization. So this is kind of copying the water cycle by heating and evaporating ocean water and then condensing the vapor and essentially distilling fresh water. So this, we might have to do that if we can't meet the demand for fresh water. And like I said before, agriculture takes most of our water. So it makes sense to look first to agriculture for ways to decrease demand because agriculture is taking 70% of our water. Farmers can improve efficiency by adopting more efficient irrigation methods, um, where maybe they are using less water, or using a different method where less water is applied to the plants. I think your book goes through a couple of methods. If you're interested, you should look through it. In addition to irrigation, we can level the fields to minimize the runoff and eliminate water-intensive crops from arid regions. So almond trees grown in California Central Valley use 10% of water consumed by the state. Just a lot of water. And there's a flood and furrow method that is when um, when you're taking the crop plants and you are flooding them with water and you're pretty much furrowing running through crops. So in which furrows running through the crops, they're flooded with water. So that's very inefficient. We're just flooding the crops with water, and that's a lot of water. So they we can maybe find a better ways to use less water. We can also reduce our use of water in the household. We can install maybe low flow faucets, shower heads, washing machines, and toilets. Um, Automatic dishwashers use less water than dishes washed by hand. So catching rain runoff from your roof in a barrel is called rainwater harvesting. That will reduce the amount of water you need to use from a hose. Um, Replacing exotic vegetation with native plants again. So it's a type of landscaping that uses plants to adapt to arid conditions. We talked about this before. And then gray water is the used water from showers and sinks. They can be used in some places for watering. So those are some ways. I also want to say that industries and municipalities can take water saving steps as well. So they are shifting to the processes that where you can use less water, and in doing so are reducing their cost. So those are some of the solutions to meet the demand of water that we have for human population. We have to kind of cut water supply or use of water in some places so we can use it in other places.